Okay, welcome back, everyone. This is the first time after the opening speeches. We'll all go in English for the purpose of speed and also a bit of smoothness, at least in our debates and discussions. We have a panel which will try to address a number of priorities and also opportunities for Slovak EU Council Presidency. We already outlined in the previous session and discussion a number of themes which of course are going to dominate the EU agenda. The upcoming UK referendum, and we did take a poll. I'm not sure what the standing of the poll right now is, but the audience here is fairly optimistic. We had about 70% saying remain. It's 74, it's even risen out of 35 people. Take part. If this were the real result, I think a lot of people would be quite relieved, but it's unlikely. But at least there is optimism in the room. But certainly this is an issue which is in many respects going to delineate a lot of the work and the agenda setting exercise of the presidency. We did spend a lot of time talking about migration. And I think we'll have a chance to discuss migration, perhaps in some depth, looking at specific legislation measures which are likely to be both tabled and perhaps adopted during the upcoming presidency. We did touch on a number of economic issues, but overall, the fundamental question which was posed at the beginning of this conference, namely, how do we keep the EU together, is something which is also a question for this panel, and perhaps I could rephrase it. How can Slovakia and other EU actors help keep the EU together, and not just help keep it together, but make it more solid in terms of the foundations, in terms of its quality, and ultimately in terms of the element of trust and the political glue which has been undermined, as we discussed again in the previous session, since the series of crises since the middle of the last decade, both political and economic crises which have hit us, and of course now we have an additional migration crisis, and now for the first time we're discussing a possible shrinking of the European Union, which might be on the table as early as the end of next week. So I'm very happy here. We have a very distinguished set of panelists. I'll start from my right. I'm very glad Korčok, who is the State Secretary, but also the plenipotentiary for the EU Council Presidency and Minister Delegate for the upcoming EU Slovak Presidency, has found time to join us. Ivan, welcome. To my further right, Caroline de Gruyter has come from Vienna, but originally from the Netherlands. Somebody who spent a number of years in Brussels, wrote a book about the Euro crisis, and writes regular columns in Dutch newspapers, and is a seasoned journalist when it comes to EU issues, but also a prolific author. And of course, it's no accident that we have somebody here from the Netherlands, because the Netherlands is in the presidential seat at the moment, and will be passing the EU Council Presidency to Slovakia. So it'll be interesting to have a bit of reflection also on the Dutch experience, which I guess is the 12th EU Council Presidency at the moment, but also discuss some of the other bigger issues on the agenda. Very warm welcome, Caroline, to you. Further on to the right, we have Helena Farrand-Carrapico, from Portugal originally, but lives and has lived in the United Kingdom for a number of years. Teaches at the Aston Center for Europe, where she's a deputy director, and deals especially with issues of internal security, Schengen migration, but of course, again, no accident, we have somebody coming in from the UK, given the UK issue on the table. Very warm welcome, Helena, to you. And last but not least, Dušan, Chrenek, to the very right, representing the European Commission office here in Bratislava, and the European Commission office is a partner of this conference, but of course it's always good to have the Commission at the table when we discuss the presidency, because that relationship with the Commission, of course with the European Parliament, will be crucial to any success. So Dušan, pleased to have you here. Okay, let's do kind of an initial round of introductory remarks by each of you, and then I'd like to ask you to keep on posing your questions. We have the Slido application. Please do join it via cell phones, and we'll try to get back to some of the questions we hadn't answered in the previous session, but we'll also pick up some new ones. I'd like to ask first Ivan Korčok for his initial thoughts at the moment, with a couple weeks to go. What, in your view, are the biggest potential lines when it comes to a successful, or as the minister put it here in the previous panel, potentially a satisfactory presidency when it comes to tough issues on the agenda? And what you would personally consider as a success, not just the big sigh on the 31st of December when the presidency ends. Every presidency is always a success when it ends, people say. But what in your view would be, that's the perception immediately, at least for those people who are involved. But what in your view would be the measure of success, if I can put it in these terms? Ivan, please.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity here this morning to talk about a title of this conference, which when I saw for the first time, it immediately came to my mind. The fact that what was theory, namely to discuss how to face the Union's centrifugal forces, that has been a theory and very often discussed over the last 10 years. All of a sudden we have emerged in a situation in the European Union where we have a completely different perception of centrifugal forces in European affairs, in the European Union. Whether we like it or not, it may become materialized after the 23rd June in the United Kingdom, and without going into detail of what that would mean, but I think on the other day, when we wake up with no vote, I think we will be living, or start living in a different world, both in the European Union and beyond. So, indeed, centrifugal forces, this is not anymore a subject for political scientists and think tankers. It's rather a very challenging issue that we have to face, and we Slovaks are going to be in the seat of the presidency right at the moment when we will be facing this problem. But I'm mentioning this not to tell you that I have headaches with this. I have no headaches whatsoever when it comes to 23rd of June, because our influence, in fact, on the outcome is zero. We will have to wait for that. I think all are good advice not to give any advice from outside to the United Kingdom, and to allow, let's say, the no camp to say that there are interventions from outside, and this is just a confirmation that anyway they want the United Kingdom to be in and to remain and to maintain the problematic issues which no vote tries to mobilize on. So this is not my headache. We are in a final stretch or run up to our presidency. Every day when I'm coming into the building of ministry, we have a countdown, a digital countdown, and I think today it's 13 days to go. So my headache is rather not a headache, but I'm very busy with fine-tuning, the last fine-tuning basically of our content. I'm very busy with our team both here in Bratislava and in Brussels, trying to synchronize cooperation between two institutions which are key for us, European Parliament and the Commission, to know exactly when the Commission intends to come up with one or the other piece of legislation, trying to sort out how ambitious the Parliament will be when it comes to those issues which are part of our presidency. But to be more specific, but brief at the same time, and to reflect on the centrifugal forces, how how we, Slovak Presidency, want to reflect it in our program. There are two main principles that we have chosen for us, and that have been a guidance for us to propose specific priorities. And those principles are the two following. One is to contribute to eliminate, well, if you want, not overcome that with the too ambitious, but to eliminate the ongoing fragmentation in the European Union. So those who will read later on the Slovak Presidency program, the one buzzword on which we built specific priorities was to face and counter fragmentation.
How?
Well, I'll come to it. Then the second point was we want to be guided by an objective to deliver both concrete results and tangible results. So I believe now is time for presidency, for institutions, for member states to talk less about what integration means, but rather to put tangible results on the table, through which I believe our citizens can trust European more than it is the case right now. And third point, you asked me, Vlado, what should be the successful outcome? UK in, where we have no influence, but at the same time UK, because if UK is out, then who would be interested in the results of Slovak presidency? I mean, let's be honest. So UK in, as much tangible results as we can deliver on the basis of our priorities. And if you want me to be more specific, I can, but then I speak another 5 or 10 minutes, and that would not be polite vis-a-vis my colleagues on the panel here.
Okay, I think that's very good for the introduction. No headache, but still a strong wish for UK in, because of course if it's in, at least we have the 28th, but there are still going to be consequences perhaps for the presidency, and we can entertain that question of what it means when the UK does stay in, also for the work of the presidency.
Can I clarify?
Yes.
Please, I don't want to be misunderstood that I don't have headache over possible UK exit. I hope this is clear, but I don't have headache right now, or I'm not nervous over, we are busy with other things. That's what I wanted to say. That make me more nervous because there are still 13 days to go for us, and we want to spend them really fine-tuning our program. But of course, it would be Europe-wide headache if UK citizens would vote no on the 23rd.
Okay. Yes, no, I think that's very clear. Parlin, please your initial remark on what this referendum might mean for the European Union. What is that telling us about the state of the EU, but also, more importantly, what the possible consequences might be in your view. And secondly, if you can give us a bit of a flair and your reflection, because of this, I wouldn't say depressed, but perhaps not ideal mood when it comes to EU politics, EU policy making. How was the presidency reflected politically in the Netherlands? This is the 12th time. Does it still make any difference to the country? Can people get mobilized around the issues, or is it rather the opposite? We all remember around in this region the Dutch referendum on the association agreement, of course, with Ukraine. So if you can touch on those two questions briefly in your introduction remarks, that'd be great.
So let's start with the referendum on next week on Thursday. I am a little bit of two minds, actually. We clearly will have a problem, all of us, and the Dutch in particular, because can you hear me, all of you? The Dutch in particular will have a big problem, because they've always been, very transatlantic in culture and in mind. We're on the continent, but we're also, we love basically everything the Brits are doing. Prime Minister Cameron is very popular in Holland. This is why he wanted to hold his famous Europe speech in the Netherlands, which was a huge event for the Dutch government. Anyway, that's a different subject. So if the UK leaves, Europe will have a big problem. But if they remain, I think Europe also will have a big problem. So a little bit, in my view, stuck between a rock and a hard place. Suppose...
Can you elaborate why you think?
Suppose they vote to stay, which I somehow believe they do, because apart the polls, it's a different story altogether. There was a great story in the New York review of books in November or October.
Can somebody do something with the microphone? Otherwise, can you try this one?
There was a great story in the New York Review of Books on polls in America and how they get it wrong more and more often. And it's a huge story, but it's worth, just taking 1 or 2 hours and reading it. I believe in the Netherlands we had a referendum about the Ukraine Association Agreement. It was very easy for people who wanted to send, a strong message to those creeps in The Hague and the creeps in Brussels and all the other establishment creeps in the rest of Europe. Like, stuff it, we'll say no. But now, all these people who cast their vote, no, they didn't live with the consequences. It was far away, In Britain, it's different. It will affect every single citizen. So I believe that people can easily think still that they will vote for Brexit, but then when it comes to casting your vote, maybe they think of their neighbors, maybe they think of their daughter or an uncle who will have difficulties with this. I think it's totally unpredictable, and I have this hunch that it will stay. But what happens then? Half of the UK will be extremely unhappy. Emotions are running very high. We saw that yesterday, unfortunately, with the murder of Joe Potts. I think the whole referendum was called by Cameron to silence or to pacify an uproar in his own party. Now if there will be a Remain, the party will be even more in uproar than they were to start with. In that case, whether Cameron remains or somebody else takes over as Prime Minister, they will not be able to move a millimeter in Brussels in the next 10 years. That's my conviction. I think we will have a very difficult time because things will have to be done in the European Union. Things will have to be done with the banks, with the euro, with the migration story, which is basically a management story, as your minister remarked earlier. So, but also if you zoom out, and I find this interesting, all the stories about Brexit, about the referendum, are coming from London. I would like to see more stories coming from Berlin. Because what the whole Britain in history, if you take a few steps back, they came to the continent several times in reaction to a dominant Germany. But then, seeing themselves on the continent, they were not very happy with it, they withdrew. This is exactly what we're seeing now again. They didn't, the Brits came to rescue us after the Second World War, but then they didn't want to join the European Union, or the whole steel community.
They go veto them twice.
Huh?
They go veto them twice. So.
Yeah. Okay. So I think without Britain, we will get a special dynamic in Europe again. The French are weak. The French are not very self-confident. They're very much afraid there's a big elephant in the room called Marine Le Pen. So the French will not be able to do a lot. So it will make Germany even more dominant on the continent. And this is very difficult for Germany, and it's also difficult for the others. So I think we will have to watch Germany. Okay, this is concerning the vote. On the presidency, I've lived in Brussels for 10 years in total, so I've seen many presidencies, 20 in total. Some good ones, some bad ones. I think the Dutch are not very bad. Usually small countries, this is the good news, are better at presidencies than big countries, because there's one secret, and that means that you have to put your own agenda, and you might as well not publish it. Events will take over. Yes. well, some small countries were less good at it. The best that I've seen in Brussels were Denmark, Luxembourg, Belgium, who were able to put their own wishes and demands in a drawer and just try to be an honest and good broker, which means you have to swallow your own agenda, you have to forget about it for half a year. Some big countries, they are not very good at it. I remember Sarkozy in 2008, who wanted to put who saw this as an opportunity to put his Mediterranean Union on the agenda again, and upsetting everybody in Central and Eastern Europe. And it utterly failed, and he lost a lot of sympathy, which he could have used to solve different issues. I think the Dutch have understood that, also without experience. Only the real criticism I've heard of the Dutch is that in the migration story, they were seen by some as too close to Germany, which is a problem. On the other hand, they could, for instance, I heard this in Austria. Austria has serious problems with the German approach in the migration story. So there was criticism of the Dutch, but at the same time the Austrians said yes, and then the Dutch come to us and they say they're trying to sell the German plan. At the same time, they actually do agree with us, and behind the screens we know it. So they could play that bridge function. Next time.
You raised two important points. One is, if the UK does leave, this will open up a whole new debate on the balance of power inside the European Union. And of course, that's a debate which we perhaps are having implicitly at the moment, but that debate will become a lot more explicit. The second issue which you also raised, and I'll let Korčok react for 1 minute quickly, is that it's increasingly difficult, even with countries like the Netherlands, which has been in the project since the beginning, to play the role of an honest broker. And that's something which, of course, has to do with the political atmosphere in the EU. Ivan, please, you wanted to react.
But I already forgot. No, but maybe, yes, small countries, can I, at the end you were a bit more critical about your country, how they performed as a presidency, but before that I wanted to say that actually I would like to be like you, like Netherlands. Be honest as Netherlands. I say it like that because I myself have experience in Brussels while I was Premier 12 presidencies, and I looked at them, of course. So I remember not only those countries, those smaller countries that you have named, Belgium, Denmark, Lithuania was excellent. Yep. And this is the smallest out of those who you have mentioned. They were excellent, but we will, for the first time, be challenged by a test of an honest broker. I don't know what it means, and I can tell you that I learned more about this over the last 6 to 12 months when preparing presidency, than I could learn while I spent 12 presidencies in Brussels. So I'm looking forward to it. I am reassuring this audience and elsewhere that we will push aside our national agenda. We will be as honest as we can. However, there are some files where we will not change our national position. I want to make it very clear, as it was the case, has been the case with Netherlands and all others before. So that will be fine. On UK, maybe I will not intervene right now. There's just one point maybe. We are dealing what will happen if they don't. No, I think the first problem will start that it is totally unclear what they will do, what their political representations will do with possible no, because you cannot do anything as a union at 27 unless the country where citizens have expressed their no, unless they make clear whether they're not notify Article 50, but whatever. And that remains unclear. And second point, before we start talking about grand design as a response, we need to have clarity at 27 what we want with the United Kingdom. So I think the first, well, that's not the presidency. That's not the presidency. So those two elements, I think, they will be dominating the agenda, let's say the hours and days and weeks after we see the outcome of UK referendum. So it is good that this is subject of a very broad discussion. At the same time, when it comes to operational business, I know exactly what will happen the next day.
Okay, thanks. Let's pass it on to Helena. You flew from Edinburgh, I think, yesterday, so you're up in Scotland. And of course, the vote in the UK is about UK's relations with the EU. In many respects, it's also about the future of the European Union, as we're hearing here, without our say. But it's also a vote about perhaps the future of the Union in the UK, which is something you can reflect on. What is the thinking in the United Kingdom about the consequences of that vote? Is it really that, do people feel that this is really something which is important? Because it's going to affect not just them, but also the others. And what are the scenarios which each camp, Remain and Brexit, are pondering at the moment?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here to be speaking to you about a topic we've been completely obsessed with in the UK, as you can imagine, for the past few years, or for the past few months, I'm sorry. Let me start maybe with the polls, actually, because I wanted to actually address something that Caroline said. I think that you're incredibly optimistic with the poll that we have here. 74%, that's fantastic. You know, I wish that was going to be the result next week. Unfortunately, the rest of the United Kingdom doesn't feel the same way. So for the past 2 weeks, the polls have been very, very pessimistic. And so for the past 2 weeks, the Leave campaign and the Leave result has been winning. Yesterday, the poll said 47 to stay, 53 to leave, and it's been more or less like that for the past 2 weeks. And even 2 days ago, the Leave campaign had a 7-point advantage, actually. The thing is, as Caroline mentioned, should we actually trust the polls? If you think about the UK general election and the Scottish referendum itself, the polls were not just wrong, they were completely wrong, completely missed the point. So, okay, there's issues of methodology regarding polling. Maybe they've been corrected for this one, possibly not. So we have to look at these polls with a certain amount of, skepticism. And so that makes us think that maybe there's a bit of wishful thinking and that we might actually, stay in the end in the EU, but we'll see. Two things that actually come out though, of the figures. One, it's going to be an incredibly close call. Absolutely, there's no doubt about this. And the other one is that there's a very, very considerable amount of people who are still undecided, between 11% and 13% of people are still undecided. So, I mean, the important thing that we should reflect on is why is it that actually the figures are so close and why are there so many undecided people? Well, first of all, historically, the UK has always seen itself as very much the awkward partner in Europe, thinking that actually its national interests did not really coincide with the interests of other member states. That has led to a number of opt-outs and opt-ins, for instance, in the area of justice home affairs, in the area, obviously, of the euro, but also to a general Euroscepticism of the population. And you can see this very, very clearly in the way the media presents the referendum and presents the interest of the UK versus the interest of Europe. Unfortunately, we take very little into considerations the consequences for the European Union, and the debate is mainly focused on consequences for the EU. There's another issue is that both the Remain and the Brexit campaign have very much been problematic in the sense that the whole debate has been developed on a Eurosceptic platform rather than on an actual debate into this is why we should stay, these are the facts. So in a way, it's almost like the Remain campaign has been hijacked by the Brexit one into discussing issues, for instance, of migration. We just had recently members of the Labour Party saying, well, we should really address the concern that UK citizens have about migration. We legislation by putting controls into freedom of circulation, for instance. So, clearly addressing the issues of the Leave campaign. The other thing is that, as Caroline mentioned, this is actually a domestic issue. So obviously, Euroscepticism is very, considerably important in the UK, but the reason why we're having a referendum has nothing to do with the levels of Euroscepticism. And this has nothing to do with the relation between the EU and UK. It's simply related to the fact that actually we had a prime minister who actually needed to wanted to have a second mandate, and the reason and the way it actually the person considered actually campaigning in the elections was by promoting a referendum, by actually saying we should address this, we should and by basically addressing the concerns of its backbenchers in the Conservative Party. So that is the real reason why we're having its domestic issues. Now, you asked me about the different scenarios afterwards for possible negotiations. So essentially, there's 5 models. And I don't know how much you want me to go into that.
Let's just maybe do an outline or pick the most likely.
So, if we think about the European economic model, bilateral agreements, the European economic model like Norway has, and then we've got the bilateral agreements like Switzerland has, we've got the customs union model like Turkey has, free trade agreement model like Andorra, and then you've got the WTO model like the rest of the world. Now, for 2 days now, we now know what the Leave campaign actually wants to do. So obviously, if there is a Brexit result, the current Prime Minister will probably cease to be Prime Minister, and someone in the Leave campaign will probably replace him. Maybe Boris Johnson, we don't know at this point, which would be quite, yes, quite serious. And what they have proposed, very specifically, is that actually we have a free trade agreement to be negotiated by 2020. So not even being part of the economic area, but actually a free trade agreement, simply like this. And this includes 4 important points. First of all, and most importantly for the UK, because there's 3 issues that dominate the debate in the UK. It's sovereignty. The UK feels that actually Brussels is dictating things to the EU, to the UK. The third one is migration. And this is a very big difference between the UK debate and the debate in the rest of the European Union. Migration is not about the refugees. Migration is not about third country nationals. Migration is, at the moment, exclusively about EU citizens. EU citizens are seen as, the reason why there's unemployment, the reason why the National Health Service is being stretched, etc., etc. So there will be, first of all, blocking the automatic access of EU citizens to the labour market of the UK. Second one, there will be an immediate deporting of European criminals to their countries of origins. Third one, there will be a repealing of the European Communities Act, and obviously trying to decouple the UK from all the laws of the EU. And fourth, there will be a cutting of the UK from every trade agreements made by Brussels. Of course, you're thinking, well, is this even possible? Is this even, what is the rationale behind this? I can't really explain that. I don't think there's much of a rationale. It's a very emotive debate about.
Isn't anybody discussing the costs of all this?
No. So obviously, one thing you can really see is that there aren't any serious proposals about how to counter the economic and political consequences of all this. There are no figures being debated. There are no serious proposals on the table. There's only, almost these disjointed ideas.
It's like a leap of faith, basically.
It's a complete leap of faith. It's a very emotional debate about, sovereignty. But sovereignty of the UK, and not going into what you mentioned recently, just before, which is about different areas of the UK. No one really thinks about the interest of Scotland, no one really thinks about the interest of Northern Ireland, when actually a Brexit debate would probably result in the end of the United Kingdom as such. No one really discusses this, because as we know, recently there's been the Scottish referendum, and the result was very, very tight. And the Scottish National Party has already said, if there is Brexit, we will consider having a second referendum, and we will probably achieve independence. Not to mention then the problem of Northern Ireland and the border that will have to be reconstructed. Anyways.
Great. No, I mean, this is a wonderful expose because we kind of have a sense of what's going on in the UK, what might be tabled, but also what is the thinking behind it and what is the thinking about consequences. I want to bring the audience at this point. We do have a number of questions from slides, but if anybody wants to ask specifically about the UK, the referendum, please take up the opportunity now. Because I want to close the debate on this and move on to other topics. Okay, if nobody from the audience, I will just get it back to the panelists. There is one question about the budget, which I think is quite interesting, and I'll give the floor to Ivan Korčok, because of course Slovakia will have to deal with the revision of the multi-annual financial framework and the consequences for day-to-day business in the EU of an exit of a country will be very practical when it comes to, for instance, budgetary issues. Ivan.
Yes, it has just disappeared from the screen. The question. Yes, UK is second largest net contributor to EU. If it leaves, how will Slovak presidency propose dealing with 10 billion euro annual hole in the budget? So thank you for the question. This is very easy because this is not for Slovak presidency at all, because the budget, where the United Kingdom is part of it, will be released by the Commission just one day after UK referendum. So basically, we're off the hook with this, dealing with that. Nevertheless, if they really leave, this is a huge problem, of course, because 10 million is a lot. I think to British rebate would leave as well at the same time. So this is not basically for Slovak presidency, but right, like any other file that will be on our table, should UK vote no, will be very much overshadowed by the consequences, including the discussion about multi-annual financial framework, mid-term review. But now to talk about what that would mean specifically in budgetary terms, if you want fiscally, minus 10 billion, of course. But this is not, I don't want to speculate on this, but this is, operationally, this is not for us.
Thank you for clarifying. Any questions on the referendum? Very briefly, please. Just specifically on the referendum.
Thank you very much. My name is Vladimír. I have a question to Mr. Korčok on the topic of the reform of the resources of the European Union.
We'll take that question later, okay? Please hold it, Mr. Vladimír. Just the referendum. Anybody? Okay. If not, let's move it. I'd like to move it on to Dušan. I don't want to push you on the UK referendum. I know the Commission has been very cautious about addressing the topic for a lot of obvious reasons. But let's get back to the presidency, because that is the theme of the panel. What are your expectations vis-à-vis the presidency? And perhaps here you can not just reflect on the Commission's role and the Commission's position, but also on your personal expectations as a representative of an institution which is very heavily involved and has been heavily involved in Slovakia in public debate on the European Union. Dušan, please.
Thanks, Vlado. For the presidency, I think that already having the presidency is a success. So a first success we had it. Because Slovakia is now really in the heart of European integration. So it's a part of Schengen, part of Eurozone. So we were missing only having the presidency. So this is some kind of culmination of our integration. On the other hand, Slovakia has a presidency in difficult times, and really when the EU is facing many challenges. Many were mentioned: migration, terrorism, still many external dangers around Europe, and also still economic situation is not the best. But I'm quite positive, really optimistic about the presidency. Also assisted at the meeting of the college with the Slovak government in Brussels. The college is coming to Slovakia. on 30th of June, 1st of July. So there is a good atmosphere and really focus on cooperation and on delivering in many areas. Some areas are easier because there is an agreement, almost complete agreement on really improving economic situation, on investment plan, on digital single market, on an energy union, really benefiting from the single market. Some areas are more difficult. Migration definitely is the most difficult area, but still there is a desire really to find a common European solution in front of differences. Now I would like to say some words where I see opportunities for the Slovak presidency. Definitely it's a service for Europe, so we will serve to European interests, less than to national interests, but still there are opportunities for Slovakia. So firstly, Slovakia can contribute to the strengthening of Europe, and if Europe is stronger, Slovakia is stronger. The second opportunity is to prove capacities, to prove abilities of Slovak leaders, but of the country, really to manage the presidency, to act as an honest broker, and to find common solutions. Third one is to increase the visibility of Slovakia. I like the branding that was presented recently, Good Idea Slovakia. It speaks about the country, that it's progressive, welcoming, attracting talents and investments, and also selling ideas, so good ideas. And now I think that the presidency is an extremely good opportunity to promote Slovakia, to promote abroad, not only on European level, but also on global level, but also internally. So really, if we are going to convince other countries and also internally people that Slovakia is a good idea, we have to really put emphasis on all aspects. So attracting talents and investment, selling good ideas, and do it really coherently. So there's a third opportunity as last one. Fourth opportunity, I see a possibility to increase awareness about Europe in Slovakia. To explain how the EU is functioning, and also to try to move away this image that there is a difference, Brussels and Slovakia, them and us. And I think there is a great opportunity also for Slovak ministers to explain what the EU is doing, and Slovak ministers will be also responsible for finding a compromise, for finding solutions in many areas. And it's going to be up to them to explain why European solutions were made, which legislations were prepared, and how also Slovakia contributed to that. Because now, unfortunately, image of the EU is not the best in Slovakia. So, connection of citizens to the EU is really weakening. And this whole spectrum of misinformation, really also some kind of propaganda, conspiracy theories, people trust less to the EU, and the presidency is an opportunity to try to change it. I don't think that it's going to be completely different at the end of presidency, but at least we should make more efforts to explain Europe to Slovak citizens, to show positive benefits of European integration, and also by delivering at the EU level, to bring new positive areas like in the digital single market, also in terms of higher investment. For example, like in coming days, there will be an agreement on co-financing from European Fund for Strategic Investment for the highway bypass of Bratislava, also agreements on promoting financial instruments for small and medium-sized companies. So there are in pipeline many issues that could be solved to Slovaks, but we need a really frank discussion and also not to focus only on diverging issues, but also on issues that they are connecting Europe with citizens.
Okay, thank you. We have a half an hour, and I'd like to kind of go through the three, I'd say, baskets of the priorities and also the issues which are on the EU agenda and which are going to be forming the priorities for the Slovak presidency. One is, of course, the set of economic issues, which includes the single market questions. Another one is the external global role of the EU. And of course, perhaps the most difficult and challenging one is the whole issue of migration and asylum. So let's start with that, if I can pose. We do have a number of questions. I don't think we are here in a particular competence, and this is not a particular forum where we can resolve the fate of the Minister of Interior in this country, so I won't raise directly that question. But there is a question of the fact that how far we can play the role of an honest broker in the Council, vis-a-vis the European Parliament, vis-a-vis the Commission when it comes to migration and asylum issues. I think we shouldn't forget also the asylum, because that's part of a big legislative package proposed by the Commission. I'll give the floor to Ivan Korčok if he can kind of enlighten us a bit on the ambition and the expectations in terms of what's specifically on the table, and then I'll ask the others to react in terms of what they think is achievable and attainable given the context. Ivan, please.
You mean now on migration?
Migration and asylum, yes.
I think the majority of you were in the room when Foreign Minister spoke and Vice President Šefčovič, and I want to recall that here in this most sensitive area for Slovak presidency, migration, we will be honest broker, and I don't think it will be even difficult not to be honest broker. And I'll explain why. First, when you read later on our program, I'd like to draw your attention to the headline, how we phrase it. We've been busy with trying to make a clear message out of the headline over migration, because we are not saying migration in the program, but we say sustainable migration and asylum policy. Our lesson from previous clashes that we have had over this problem was that migration simply is a phenomenon which has been here for decades and centuries, which is here, will be here. But it became a problem once it turned out to be unsustainable. And we have to realize that we must stop that kind of migration, as we've seen it last year when we completely lost control over it. So sustainable migration. And part of it is, of course, asylum policy. Now, when you look at the broad range of issues that are included in the migration agenda, I think there is only one which is of particular importance. I'm not questioning that, but this is just one of the whole concept how to make it sustainable, where we have disagreement. And why, again, I'm not nervous for Slovak presidency is the fact that let's say the overhaul of Dublin and the major changes that should be implemented by quota system, permanent quota system, it is a fiction to believe that it is just Slovakia and Poland and Hungary and the whole Visegrad that has a problem with what the Commission has proposed. This is a fiction. And therefore I think it will not be that difficult for Slovakia to play an honest broker when we deal with this legislation, because I'm absolutely sure it will be the composition of countries who have a problem with what the Commission has proposed will be much, much more numerous than the 4 Visegrad countries which are labeled as those ones who are not behaving properly, who are not showing enough solidarity. Unfortunately, I'm official representative, so I cannot name names of those countries, but I know what I'm talking about, and very soon you will see that they will be very vocal on it. But then we have the rest. But we can be very operational, and I'm referring to what I said at the beginning, that we want to have tangible results. Let me start. We will follow on the tremendous and great job that the Dutch presidency has done with the Border and Coast Guard. And we want to make it operational so that we don't not only have the basis and legal agreement, but we want to make it operational, Border and Coast Guard. Secondly, there are other important issues, not only for migration, but for people that they understand that results serve their interest. So-called, I don't know whether you've ever heard of so-called exit-entry system. This is part of the concept of smart borders. And the second important element of positive agenda under Slovak presidency will be so-called European ESTA. Everyone who is traveling to the United States knows that prior to, for countries not having visa, prior to your travel, you have to basically fill in an electronic form, which is called ESTA for the United States. And the Commission is working now, or exploring whether we could introduce something for European Union as well, which I believe very much serves our interest of our citizens, to make travel for those who are traveling very often more comfortable, but this is also extremely important from the security point of view. And last point, where we will have consensus very soon, is June. I mean, next week, we will have consensus on, I think, key part, which should lead us to sustainable migration policy, and that is the so-called external dimension. We are working on it already, how to match better development assistance and cooperation of countries on the African continent when it comes to readmission and returns. It all will be very costly. It is a fiction to believe that we can manage this crisis without better foreign policy, more engagement in our neighborhood, and at the same time that it will be for free. It will not be for free. It will cost more money if we want to regain control of migration. So many are concerned over the fact that the country is coming in right now, which has had such a vocal and critical position over one element. I dare say, however, at this point, it will not necessarily be that divisive and that difficult to remember. It will be much more countries opposing such fantastic ideas. Dušan is my friend, placed by the Commission, to pay 250,000 fine for those who are not taking migrants. So congratulations, Dušan. I'll be hard now. But if you want to reach out to people and convince them that it is reasonable what we are doing in the European Union, I don't understand why are you proposing this. And this is inexplicable, really. So you can have fantastic marketing, you can have fantastic communication strategy. This is not communicable, not at all.
Well, it is not communicable perhaps in Slovakia, but we always know... Is
the fine Vladimír communicable in where? Take that.
No. The Commission proposals are never something which comes out of the blue. It's always a result of debate across member states. And you could probably raise the same point in Greece, you could raise the same point in Southern Italy, you could raise the same point in other countries.
Do you know why I'm so so critical with this, Dušan? We are proposing now, the Commission is proposing the fines here. But the Commission, and that's not the proposal, that's part of the system, that we impose fines against countries who are not respecting the Stability and Growth Pact. Has never ever been used, with one exception, for Hungary, which was where the funds were stopped for Hungary. Year by year, I think we're dismantling Stability and Growth Pact, and fines are part of it. And I know you will react right now, but there are another important decisions on the table. So don't worry, it will be okay.
Tough on his broker, tough communication up ahead with the Commission. Dušan, quick reaction and Caroline, please.
Actually, I agree with
be careful because they pay you.
that we should be optimistic that Slovakia is going to be an honest broker and taking into account interests of all countries, but also in taking into account position of the European Parliament and other partners, because we have an agreement also with Turkey, and we have other commitments to international players. So that is a global issue, and also I'm optimistic because like really two main symbols of the EU have been under threat. So Euro, common currency, and now Schengen, free movement. And with Euro, we managed at least to put it a little bit aside. And it's not the same danger like some years ago, but also decisions have been taken through years. We didn't have the solution immediately. And this refugee crisis, last year, the Commission, immediately after start of the crisis, Commission put on the table a set of proposals or like set of possible solutions. Like not immediately with legislative proposals, but actually all elements were on the table in May last year. And slowly we are advancing. And really, there is an agreement that Dublin system doesn't work. And also this is an example now that the EU is functioning sometimes only in times of crisis, that we are forced to do something. European Border and Coastal Guard is another example. The Commission proposed it many years ago. The member states, they blocked because there was no push, there was no crisis of such dimension. Now we have that crisis, and even at the beginning when the Commission proposed European Border and Coastal Guard, some countries were against. Fortunately, now they are on board. The problem with relocation and resettlement is really that we have to do it like that. There is no way to avoid it. The question is to do it on voluntary basis, mandatory basis. It didn't work on a voluntary basis. And the Commission proposed something that thought that it was the best in that situation. Now it's on member states to find a solution. The Presidency of Luxembourg managed to get a solution that it's not the best, and it was opposed by some countries. Now it's going to be for the Slovak Presidency to lead discussions in the Council. And I think that also taking into consideration the Slovak position, it has a chance to advance. On European Border and Coastal Guard, it's much easier, and definitely it will be a success for the Slovak Presidency to put it in place. So really to have active functioning European Border and Coastal Guard. On asylum system, we will see.
Yes, thanks for raising one important point, which is something which I understand in the UK is a problem in the domestic debate. The Commission doesn't decide. The Commission tables proposals. It's the member states in the European Parliament which do decide ultimately. So of course it's up to the member states to discuss it, to go harshly after their interests, but also to come to a decision. Let's spend a bit more time on this, and I'll pass it to both of you. Let's see if anybody has a question on migration. No. Carlin, you wanted to react, please, and then Lena.
Okay. I have a complete déjà vu with these discussions. I was in Brussels between 1999 and 2004. Schengen was just, being drawn up. We eliminated the interior borders. We had a huge amount of Bosnian refugees coming into Europe, and remember Lampedusa? Lots of people who are considered migrants, not refugees. So the Commission, under Commissioner Vitorino, the Portuguese, he started drawing up all kinds of proposals. And most of these proposals were shot to pieces by the member states. It was like, it's not necessary. It's just like you let all the banks go European, but you cannot agree on common supervision. One day chickens will come home to roost, and this is now exactly what's happening. Yeah. So yes, I think we should come up now with something sustainable, because you cannot just have Frontex with 90 people based in Warsaw with such a tiny budget, and then blaming the European Union. I mean, this is what really bothers me all the time. First, it's the national governments who are making a complete mess out of it, and then they blame Europe. Europe doesn't work. The same goes for proposals. I heard it this morning, actually. The minister was saying, yes, we could agree to legal migration. We have to formulate what kind of people we need. I mean, I live in Vienna. We have a lot of, when my computer breaks down or my roof is leaking, it's always a Pole or a Slovak or a Bulgarian who comes and fixes it. So here now, you need yet other people. I think it makes so much sense to formulate and finally have a policy for that. We need to harmonize asylum procedures in Europe so that not smugglers decide where people go, but that we decide. I think this whole problem is a management problem. If we organize it well and properly, and yes, it will hurt here and there. Okay, so what? Thank you.
Thank you. So, migration management problem. Lena, you've been dealing with the issue professionally for a number of years. How optimistic are you it can be managed?
I was actually wanting to react one of the things that you said earlier on.
Please do. Please.
That it reinforces what Caroline was saying, that actually one of the problems that the Slovak presidency will have is that it has to deal with a common asylum policy that is only common on paper. And so, how does it actually make it more manageable? How does it create, because one of the things you said is we have to stop unsustainable migration. And how do you actually stop unsustainable migration? You can't stop people from migrating, that's not possible, unless you suddenly invest dramatically in solving the conflicts which are actually leading people to leave. But the problem is that the reception conditions are simply not there. So either you actually improve the reception conditions in different countries and try to create a management system, or a common, you're still going to have unsustainable migration, and it's going to be unsustainable not because so many people are arriving, but because the conditions in the European Union are actually unsustainable. So I actually wanted to ask one more question, which is slightly to the side, actually, and you don't have to answer it now, but I was wondering whether this also relates to a comment that Caroline made, whether the Slovak presidency has considered putting it on its agenda the control of freedom of circulation as proposed by the UK and, of workers specifically.
No single workers.
Ivan, you want to react? Please.
When I outlined what could be consensual under Slovak presidency under the migration file, I of course should have said at the beginning that the primary goal for all of us to regain control is protection of external borders. The problem, unfortunately, and this was enforced error, like in a tennis, you know, and that happened last year in the most critical moment when the whole crisis started in Central Mediterranean, because our response to those tragic events, and that therefore unenforced error, I say, was that we have totally focused on solidarity part, and in the forefront we put the need to redistribute, and in fact for more than 6 months the common sense disappeared, which has never been there by then, disappeared, that in order to regain control of migration, you have to regain control at external borders. I was almost crucified in General Affairs Council when I said in September last year, so basically half a year later, after the tragic events started to culminate in Central Mediterranean, that now instead of focusing on redistribution, we have to regain control at external borders. So therefore, this is extremely, extremely important. I want to clarify, it's not sealing them, but it is absolutely impossible to continue policy that 1 million came to Europe and we have no idea whatsoever what those people are. So regaining control of external borders means, in my view, to have capacities in order to ensure that you can distinguish between those who are eligible for international protection or amongst those who are not. And then you can start readmission and return. Unfortunately, that lasted too long. Two, on migration, I think it will be key what we agree now in June with the external strategies. Because while the Western Balkan route is closed, for whatever reasons, there is, I'm not saying that I agree with all the reasons, but for whatever reasons, the reality is that instead of thousands pouring in every day, you have 100-200 persons per week. So, but there is still pending problem and question of time when it comes to Central Mediterranean and Northern Africa. And therefore, June is extremely important to move from sort of collective exercise that we started in Valletta last year to individually tailor-made strategies towards members of origin on African continent. We want to be active as much as we can as a presidency during our term, and I hope that at the end of our presidency, many pieces of legislation will be in place, and there is positive agenda, including blue card, for example. It will not be easy. It will not be easy, because many countries, and it's not the case of Slovakia, it's the case of Western European countries, have their own blue card strategies. And now the question is whether we want to have it as a union. So it's not a problem for us. Not at all. And posting of workers, this is from the side, that there is this yellow card, so we are waiting for the Commission to what extent they will reflect on it. And then when it comes on our table, without any change, now I have to be careful because people are tweeting, I am sure that the divisive situation will simply remain in the Council. It stays on the basis of proposal that the Commission has made.
Lena, quick reaction and we'll pause the migration bit, please.
Very quick reaction to this. Well, the thing is, if you ask any migration scholar to tell you about borders, they will be unanimous in saying border control is incredibly inefficient at actually controlling migration.
But
it's just
sorry, but the problem was politically that it was taboo in a critical phase when people in Middle East and in Africa saw that smugglers are making money and they have a chance to go in. Our response was not that the control of external borders is key. No, redistribution is key. So where was the common sense?
Yeah, we need to close this if we're going to get to the economic issues, and I want to get to the economic issues. We have about 10 minutes before we disperse for lunch, and I think we all deserve lunch. I think we've outlined the main issues, and it's clear that it's going to be a tough job being an honest broker. Although you are optimistic, it certainly is not going to be easy, but I do hope that certain files get closed up, and particularly when it comes to the border control, when it comes to Frontex, when it comes to the practical issues, there can be progress also in relation to the future treaties with the African countries. So thanks for that. Let's move on to the last set of questions, which relate to the economic questions. And
there is still a question.
Yes, there is that question. I want to raise it, but I'd like to kind of couch it in a wider issue which was raised by somebody who is anonymous here. But basically, the question is how to push for necessary further integration, also in economic realm, when support for the EU is deteriorating, and where do you see the opportunities to sell the positive added value of the EU when we look at the economic issues which are going to be tabled during the Slovak Council presidency. And I'd like to ask the audience, this is the last chance, I'd like to ask Mr. Palani to raise this question about the budget, and anybody else who wants to join the debate, and then we'll get it back to the panel.
Thank you very much. Let me switch to the Slovak because I have questions to Mr. Korčok. Mám otázku, ktorá sa týka reformy vlastných zdrojov v Európskej únii. Pracuje skupina na vysokej úrovni pána Montiho, ktorá bude končiť svoju prácu počas slovenského predsedníctva. No, reforma vlastných zdrojov Európskej únie je skutočná výzva, je šanca pre predsedníctvo, lebo táto myšlienka vznikla rímskymi zmluvami a za 60 rokov sa ju ešte nepodarilo uviesť do života. Preto sa chcem spýtať, či máte nejaké podrobnejšie informácie o tom, ako pracuje táto skupina pána Montiho, lebo aj rada má 3 zástupcov v tejto skupine a chcem sa spýtať, ako sa s nimi koordinuje, ako vidíte výstupy tejto skupiny. Len tak na okraj, ak hovoríme o postavení tých krajín, tak pán Ševčovič bol členom tejto skupiny v minulej komisii, lebo bol zodpovedný za medziinštitucionálne vzťahy, potom prestal byť, lebo je zodpovedný za Energetickú úniu. Rada tam má 3 zástupcov, my keď máme predsedať, už tam nemáme zástupcu, takže chcem sa spýtať, ako s nimi...
Okay, I think the question is clear. We have the oil sources and the Monti group.
Ako vidíte reformu vlastných zdrojov?
The reform of... Okay, I'll just translate into English, at least for the panelists. The question is very basically about the reform of the EU's own sources. And there is a group which has been working on this working group led by Mr. Monti. And the question is how the Slovak Council presidency sees the work and also the reform. Let's take one, there is one more question here, please.
My name is Julia Skoročova. I'm an advisor with Greenpeace for Central and Eastern Europe. I have a question on economic policy. So one of the big packages which have not been mentioned yet here are the TTIP and CETA talks. Really big stuff for the Slovak presidency. And I see this as a very obvious opportunity to actually address the lack of trust between citizens, national governments, and the EU level. If Slovakia were to push for cementing the status of these 2 agreements as mixed agreements. So what are your personal or professional opinions on this? What are the plans?
Right, that's a very poignant question. Anybody else? If not, I propose that we kind of do it in reverse order and start with Dušan, if we can do that. And your reaction to that question, which I raised about what positive things we can push in the EU, and if we can tie it to any economic agenda, which of course people perceive as something tangible often, that would be great. Please.
So definitely on
Definitely
on economic agenda, there are many possibilities to move forward, really to support economic growth and employment. And this is really by deepening single market. Single market is a great benefit for the EU, and we can still deepen in many areas, and mainly now in digital single market, really removing barriers, obstacles in digital single market. That is estimated if we remove all barriers, the European economy can get 415 billion euros a year from this. So for Slovakia, this is like tangible benefits would be with the agreement on geo-blocking, on portability, on really finishing this removing of roaming charges. Still, there is a need for another legislation in this area, and also to move forward on e-commerce and to create potential for further development for 5G. For that we need new frequency, so that's for Slovakia to get an agreement on that. In the Energy Union, Vice President Šefčovič put it already on the table. There are again many proposals regarding gas security, also issues related to climate change, environment. So that is again a positive agenda. Also deepening of economic and monetary union in the area of efficiency, also in the area of skills. So agenda for new skills and for workers in order to prepare people better for job market. So really that there are many positive issues, and Slovakia can deliver on many files.
Thank you, Dušan.
Only on own resources, the Commission definitely supports the work of high-level group, and in the past, Commission already proposed a reform of own resources, but Member States didn't accept it. So that's what the Council.
The power is in the Member States. Yes. Lena, your reflection on what, how you can push for further integration given the state of the mood across the EU, and any specific reflections on the policies you want to mention, please.
Yeah, I can't comment that much on the economic agenda, but how to push integration further. Yesterday I was reading a commentary about, the positive outcome of Brexit would be actually that then finally we would be able to actually push forward with, further integration, which I don't buy that much into it. But I think that the best way would actually be to make sure that there is, if there is Brexit, that there is a trade agreement or an agreement of some sort that actually can still prevent the internal market from being reduced, but actually make sure that actually our GDP is not lowered, and that it doesn't really harm our role as an international economic actor in the world. Not only economic actor, but also as a security actor in the world. One of the things that actually was mentioned in the first panel was actually the global strategy, and I mean at the moment it's paused basically. It's just waiting for the referendum results, just to see, because actually the UK leaves, actually the strategy might have to be completely scrapped, because the EU is not going to be the same international actor with and without the UK. So I think that you really have to somehow go beyond the emotive debates and actually think in a rational ways. How can we actually take advantage of the the bad situation and actually try to conciliate all the different interests?
Thank you. Arlene, any ideas, please?
Yeah, I'd like to zoom out again, if I may, because it is very good, I think, that everywhere in Europe, everybody's realizing, like, if we continue smashing each other's heads over emotional issues, and with emotional arguments, we're not going to get anywhere. And it's very, very difficult, it has been very difficult to build the European Union. Are we really trying to risk it? Because you can demolish it in a couple of weeks now. So it's good we talk economy, but don't forget the economy in Europe is all about politics. The internal market is a tool. So you need political backup for that market to function. And we've been all, my favorite question to former ministers of finance, or any minister, is how could you have deregulated all kinds of bank regulations and market regulations during the 90s and failed to implement political backup. You can, if you have one common market, you need to be able to agree on the policies behind it. Otherwise, you know, a storm takes off and the whole thing is blown away. So, yes, it is very good to talk about the economy, but we should not forget to think of the political aspects that we absolutely need, because otherwise we won't get out of this one. That would be my point.
So the politics of insurance policy making in the EU.
Yeah.
Okay. Ivan Korčok, please.
I totally agree with the last point. Extremely important, because it is very easy to draw up and even agree on a strategy, but then when you go back from Brussels, then you need to have political backup for that. All of a sudden you're pushed with your back against the wall, because you have to explain it to your constituency. To your constituency, what it means that we have almost functioning free movement of capital, because everyone can subscribe to 4 freedoms in internal market, but there is a cherry picking. Nobody is questioning free movement of capital, but all of a sudden, if UK stays, we will have limitations of free movement of people, on the basis of what we implement out of it. So politically, I totally agree that even the best strategy, unless it has broader political backing, and unless we actively seek for that backing in our respective member states. Here I believe Commission very often is right. Commission is right with many things. The problem is our delivery back home. And this is the reality as well. I don't want to be seen as someone who is, opportunistically anytime criticizing Commission. No. I think we are lagging behind in member states, because the Commission has proposed services passport. What? So where is the problem? To lessen the administrative burden for those who want to offer services across the borders. But there were 2 questions I don't want to bypass. One about high-level group of own resources. Mr. Farrand-Carrapico, I know he is dealing with that. We have very difficult and challenging presidency when it comes to budgetary issues. And there are 3 specific points which are part of this. I call it package, it's not, but it is on our table. Number 1, a tried must for Slovak presidency is to get a deal on annual budget next year, because this is the 2nd semester objective. Very difficult, I can tell you, very difficult. 2, to start discussion about midterm review of multi-annual financial framework. We know the timing more or less when the Commission comes up with that in September most probably. We don't know yet about the components of it. And 3, we will continue the work which started the Dutch presidency, meaning the discussion about post-2020. And now I'm coming to your point. We will not, as a presidency, we have no competence for it, to push when it comes to the work of Professor Monti. So we're waiting for the outcome, which will be put on the table, and then the member states will have to reflect on it. To what extent we have political backing for something which is obvious? Which is obvious that we cannot endlessly, work with budget and basically contributions to budget, which are composed like they are. So this is an obvious reality, but again, extremely sensitive political issue. And on TTIP and CETA, the question was whether we would like to, as a presidency, to see it mixed agreements. I'm talking now about the question of a colleague. She's there, but so so what was the
The question on TTIP and CETA, what was the question? Whether there should be mixed agreements?
No, I do think they should be mixed agreements, but I also see it as an opportunity to address these issues that we have discussed until now, the lack of trust, lack of empowerment for all levels, starting with individual citizens.
I agree. We have no time to go into details, but you know, my lesson from the public perception and the overall discussion over trade issues, and here most prominently TTIP and CETA, and under our term there is another one, market economy status of China. So there are three difficult issues. But my lesson from it is that we totally failed with communicating rightly and actively about TTIP. I want to say it was kidnapped, I think, by myths and allegations. And now, as we are approaching maybe the end or end game of negotiations, I don't think we will be able to regain trust, political backing for it. But I can say on behalf not of Slovak presidency, on behalf of Slovakia, we are convinced that both TTIP and CETA are mixed agreements. So they have to go through national parliaments, because you are right, with that far-reaching agreements, you simply cannot bypass national parliaments, because then you are lacking legitimacy for issues which hugely impact on member states. Well, we don't have time. We discussed basically migration, but there is so much more in our presidency. I can give you many possible tangible results if you want. Energy union, digital single market, data portability, geo-blocking, security of gas supply, intergovernmental agreements, capital markets union. Does anybody still agree, or is it what it is? Because this is a problem of communication. But there are many issues where I'm very confident we will, as a presidency, deliver.
I know we didn't touch on a lot of these issues. Some of those are perhaps less controversial than the ones we had discussed, and I think we had to start with the obvious issue of the referendum, and of course it was good for us to spend a lot of time on migration, but we at least open up the economic field a bit, and that's also an invitation to all of you to stay not just for lunch, which is being served downstairs, but also to come back here promptly at 1:15, because we will have a panel on the state of the Eurozone, and also the European semester, and basically the division of labor between the member states and the Union when it comes to addressing a lot of the economic problems we are facing across Europe. So please do come back, but before we do this, first help me in thanking our wonderful panelists. I thought this was a very good debate and a very good introduction to not just the Slovak presidency, but also the politics of policymaking in the EU, which is going to be the core business of the presidency, and of course of a lot of the events which might or might not capture the presidency itself, like the consequences of the UK referendum. So thank you very much.